you access the files or you're on the internet now?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Do you think you can jump and stuff if my internet stopped working?
Did y'all get the new password?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine.
Despite that.
You maybe like a Safari Mac thing or something.
It doesn't sound. Did it send to you? Well, did you get it? I don't know.
Yeah.
I have it now. Okay, awesome. Can you just check that is working? Jesus.
I couldn't resist, Casey.
Dude, I don't even remember that.
That's the difference between me and you.
My house remembers everything. Do you have another one yet?
No.
The only reason I did it was because it was fucking. If it was anyone else, I would have.
It was such
It would have seemed too petty. I mean, it was incredibly petty anyway, but like,
It was so petty. Okay, I'm gonna get another jump drive. I have that one. That one's not working for my computer. Sorry.
I remember voting for you in some debate in the Elons of the Barton form. I think it was like,
the next one, or my sophomore year. I think you voted for me on the RC 50 space.
yes, I remember that debate.
I also remember you judged. I think it was
I
the
remember
Barton
not
one.
being very close. Maybe the maybe.
Yeah, that was pretty. I think we lost that one.
Who voted against you? Do you remember?
Interesting.
Wow. What debate are you talking about though? Like, what were some broad things that happened?
Yeah. Afghanistan, we went. That was when Bacchus was.
That
That was when Pounding was
Bacchus
Bacchus.
that they had no cards on.
Oh, except we had.
He did clearly lost. He voted the right way. He was just like Scotty P is a god, so he had to vote the right way.
That's a separate issue.
Is that working for y'all?
Yeah.
Get out, we got it. Cool. Then we're good.
The critique, the estimate, the neoliberal ideology, legalization, and racialized violence, the market, Calhoun 14, this is not free market marijuana, is a state-controlled dream of political progressive, the root of this ethos of distortion, we must only be legal on the that is, put enhanced responsible retail, big marijuana, where marijuana legalization seems for legal privatization, marketing, liberation deals, most victimized by state depression, marijuana, market, finance, background checks are enough to exclude individuals from operating as vendors, racialized these many black individuals with permanent act, affixed to them, and these laws do not address like libertarian concept of privatization, legalization picks the winners of the weed market, from those lucky not to find something wrong with the law, and those who have access to capital, but even after legalization, many remain shackled by the pre-existing landscape and by regulation which prohibit them from participating or legalized street dealers. We have to treat them as inherently dangerous, involved in the direction of marijuana towards centralization and exclusion movements are coming against the neoliberalism now. The only way to stop it changing to ecological class and resource conflict. Shiva 12, the dominant economic motives linked to overshoot resources, ecological capacity, and the violent resource cuts because the species climate capacity extinction of our species makes not have ecological justice having is involved. Seeing ourselves as pretty ecological adjustment requires that privacy dominant economic models to conflict with ecological democracy government movements are rising and such party program people want to drag nations to by social justice for societies for 1% of grab research pushing out any form of democracy. There's another paradigm in general force austerity that can help powerful government institutions simplicity enables to adjust and enhance democracy. Vote negative to open up space for resistance against neoliberalism. Blackburn 2 global networks fundamentally change the dynamics of simple blacks and return to the national phenomenon for against multiple institutional communities make slides first after something that appears to be simple resemble globalization with a human face. Adequate responsibility to engage with global engagement beyond the nation state and essential democratic principle of the international elements is essential but difficult based on a commitment of democracy that goes beyond the legal procedures commonly pointed to. The right to extraordinary direct engagement political foundation must require constant readjustments in the attempt to question established norms that movements make an indispensable contribution to democratic politics. Political symptom movements is located precisely in the fact that they cannot be controlled by central institutional framework. They open up possibilities for social change absent within legal established legal system where political awareness need to be imposed by legal norms or political procedures needs to be emerged of a struggle over values in society. The fact that the struggle is ongoing does not distract from a positive potential topicality. Legalization requires specifying how the drugs are made legally available. Leading into decriminalization, legal criminal prosecution on option is often to use legalization which specifies how drugs can be made legally available. Decriminalization is limited in its utilities and only states will not be done. And legal options are available. Vote neg, one policy, education. They make it impossible to determine the results of the plan. Vote neg on presumption, climate, 90 legalization can be because of moving journal spectrum of extension legalization happens really just how or a drug should be moved such details business easily determined across the consequence of legalization depend almost entirely on the details of the regulatory regime. Pricing condition availability will be more powerful in shaping consumption than in fact drug legal rules determine whether the problems get better or worse. Regulatory apparatus will determine virtue reduction. Second, after conditionality, the breadth of the term legalized drugs counterplay competition to settlings because they can all agree to clarify the plan based on one C strategy. Next off, politics. The GOP is likely to nearly regain control now. Barney, 19 there are visible about their shoots of possible restriction and party hole inside there. And PDP vote headed Republican Jaffa. That Republicans have applied prices is playing number raised the Gomer Hope Silver. And Republican getting control, but he puts a chance of 53%. Democrat have raised a lot more money, especially when one constitution with that high Republican 10 marijuana legalization is key to a Democratic win. Apple on 14. How can Democrats win in 2014? Run a poll. There's a majority supporting legalization of marijuana among the 18 to 34-year-olds. While the Democratic Party struggled to turn out voters, 18 made 18% elected by pushing legal marijuana. National Democrats pride motivation young people to vote. Numbers backing up that triggers GOP loss. Meyer, 14, the theme of the year, voters disappointing Congress, but Seaman contact rascals and almost local tornado touchdown doesn't look likely that will be a wave of elections, not skill driving issues, the economic issues, scheduling, and the array of global issues confused. It's almost universal that some of professional elections, the Republicans will hold on the House, not good, your chance to capture Senate by a slim margin crushes the Asia pivot, CAC 14, there's a growing sense that this November, Republican Party control both houses, there's a little box getting investigated all managed posts and foreign faces, and that way, Party controls legislation, the Democrats panel, when let's go Obama's like the makes first chase on, unless she's like foreign defense when vote to face, gives the panel like Asian speaks among Obama's advisors to GOP actually more favorable than pivot, members of Obama's own party, Democrats are large. The favor of defense budgets are that threatened on many Americans when question Asia Republicans who prevail Obama will want to reduce the partisan gap Asia offers perfect Asian Republicans want every incentive to reciprocate American ones we expect results from GOP failure to achieve anything would put risk between GOP and development they faced in 96 and 2012. Asia, here prevents global nuclear war, Hill be in London. The military presence remains valuable global stability. Korea is letting U.S. military nuclearize China will undermine to restructure U.S. must involve in Asia might say military balance will involve potential investment making right investment means less focus on Asia goals. The Middle East protecting world defense terrorists, of course, like global can be better by shift of U.S. efforts away from Middle East rotation, particularly like the budgetary pressure to support the U.S. security ought to be allocated more spending shoring up the Asian nation will require restraint next off of the treaty. DA legalization violates U.S. obligations under the single convention of narcotic drugs. Duly tailored 2012 strategy. Moving from parties to go to treat the institute of policy national laws, including this regulation requirements destroying the single convention of treaty very seriously should be on the drug control possibly of nation. Your last 20 drugs don't treat commits to that disability entire treaty systems like application of such principles alone calling question. Literally many very treaties in the world on areas of United States remain high level international law. Treaty abrogation breaks the foundation of international law. Spills over Coblo 13 window. World's strongest combative state behaves way other countries may make disrupt the convention by Cavalier Archers I want to U.S. response for intensive internal fighting supposed to be a party compliance to U.S. defense new law avoiding following on my treaties jeopardize fabric of international law unaccused unjustified non-compliance all these the nation's reputation and degrades U.S. ability to drive United States to conform with their obligations and full on treaties from trade to human rights and the law of the sea that solves nuclear war. Shaver 12. Power fragment, states holding nuclear weapons, stabilize risk control of terrorists, use climate change intensifies the geoengineering with support for climate stabilization, yet countries are engaged in global undercutting international law. There's a role for international law in coordinating decisions and limiting infectious disease for killing, WMD and weakening of public goods, challenges posed imminent threats institutions need to be formed after collision climate change posed international risk, international law facilitates public goods, supports to be ozone depletion, stable climate and peace, and nation battle overcome black knife free right pump to the administration, criminal legal class, like critical wolf, thing creating means country of international interest in mounting national interest in relation to the direction of global public goods. Next up is accountable. Text, the United States should, 1, substantially increase prosecutions of financial institution employees involved in money laundering on behalf of Mexican drug trafficking organizations, and 2, eliminate drug tests for federal employees and let all potential applicants know of the change publicly. Laundering planks false cartels. Morris 13. Despite arguments about drug legalization, most second rate combating distributing drug money corruption, legal human much practice GSU no longer it's under money. The bank continue to visit drug TCS prosecuting bank employees money laundering would be a better tactic. Pictures of the chief compliance officer when he actually covered by right to turn ahead and financial penalty for the tracking of technical funds to be easier for unravel the state is fun. One more up. Counterpoint. Text. The United States federal government should substantially increase prosecutions of marijuana producers and distributors, including but not limited to Washington and Colorado, for violations of federal law regarding controlled substances. Makes all of our offense unique. Prosecutions fundamentally eliminate permissive state marijuana regimes. 213. Even if courts do not invalidate state marijuana laws, the protected federal campaign of prosecuting marijuana distributors would have a powerful constraining effect on all of those who contemplate using and distributing. However, clearly they might comply with state law. Permissive state laws could be virtually nullified. Case. Cartel. Drug violence is decreasing, there's no impact anyway. Deal 14, Mexico's cracking on commercial speeding, driving cars, contact crimes, speeding, carrying out small groups, focus on money when they came from pressure, big groups, small presence, recent arrests, and not being reduced things, balance report, says my board, 92% work up from 2 days, afraid the moment of probable peaking, so that the overall crime has gone down. U.S. citizens should not be feared traveling to Mexico, and there's no impact to any spikes that have occurred. 13 to 14 for Mexico. The nation being journalists on the way, violence speaking 21 became one of them, but so far for numbers, somewhere years ago, the violence, if you want to involve this different kind of violence, your global speak corner violence, don't think that you ask your under your issue or other people who see things calming down competition is eroding, single lower one, even after arrest of all Chapo marijuana legalization does does not solve. If anything, it makes cartel violence worse. Kilmer about 10 gross revenues for marijuana is less than $2 billion. Claims that their 60% of extra revenues come from marijuana should not be taken seriously. Large reduction in revenues could increase violence in the short run. There is no quick, feasible fix. Fundamental issues related to the injustice system need to be addressed. And cartels are resilient and diversified. They've adapted a mafia model that is dependent on trafficking, so they would still attack tickets and eliminate legalization would be enough. Cartels are like mafia. They have diversified, not actual alternatives, more community, little federal government content. Cartels got more creative markets, more trying to supermarket cars, car code, more people, large for provide direct link. The Mexican economy is resilient, takes out their energy argument on Team 13. Next one, refigure to provide resilient, vibrant economic expansion. Has been faster in time, past decades, between sets of China and U.S. market, and ambition reform agendas to overcome any absolute rapid economic growth, increased competition, critical sectors, promising economic power, no terrorism on the U.S.-Mexico border is high. Stewart 14 lost their media border crisis back in 2013. Immigration was at significant levels of high. This year's Mexico border serving intervals along the boogeyman of terrorism analysis history plot show that changes in transition show no claims to be unfounded. No impact on oil shocks, non-eliminable oil shock across the economy. New York suggests no major center foreign policy is fundamentally wrong. The New York suggests that the oil shocks around the floor. Economy is the Robinson Scholar found the market to be remarkably adaptable, surprisingly quick at compensating for the U.S. economy is less than our part Gulf oil incentive to change the prices, hedges, not solve war. Friedman 13. Brooks argue that power produces peaceful world directs competition, declining competition, great privacy, with difficult stopping competition. Well, most little threat for research. Indicate research years power diminishing war. Those calls are war system against high progressive states. Scenarios are big one prices, restraint, paranoia, spends from, and charity about attention to U.S. governments are likely to turn the competition will ensure anyway the competition close to the worst kinds of rise. Possibilities for remote disengage U.S. having implemented formal lines for China relations and business. FBI! This is a laughable internal link. The astronaut key security clearance is necessary. Test legalization would cost 15 billion per hour, so link turns the advantage in productivity. Climate 14 loss legalization would mainly accrue to the minority of consumers who maintain cannabis legal availability is likely to add to numbers. Legalization might increase the amount of time spent stolen by 15 billion hours per year. Cyber war is not an existential threat. Studies prove nearly 13 Americans not facing extra cyber threat. Remember, nuclear war, cyber technology, are really difficult to studies to show that the United States is facing over no test. There have been no cases of anyone dying. Cyber rates are still warning for cyber harbor over 20 to 70 years since Pearl Harbor. It is not add to existential risk. The China missile defense argument does not solve nuclear wars. Most solves missile defense elsewhere. So hedge defense applies, and there's no China nuclear modernization is not a threat. Wall threat inflation about China. What's going on here? Not by China has modern strategic force in Jordan for doing rights, and a handful of ballistic missiles can reach the U.S. Mark that can reach the U.S.
Could I get the second telephone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to right now. Just reading music.
Mark this card.
Or, oh, you don't have internet. Actually, don't do that yet.
I won't say it.
All right.
I already know.
I'm good.
Neoliberalism, what kind of movements that are coming to destroy? Because your evidence just indicates people want to have different system. What about that is effective in changing the current system?
So it's like movements against austerity around the globe. We saw
Can you
evidence
give me
like
one
movements-
example in which anti-neoliberal movement have been successful?
Our evidence talks about the upwelling of these movements, i.e., yeah, it hasn't torn down neolib, but our card says that globally there's anti-austerity measures, i.e., in Latin America, Central Asia, as well as the anti-Wall Street
never
movement.
worked, but that's fine. Topicality, specification. Your evidence indicates we need to specify how the drugs become available. We talked about like dispensaries or the way that people could acquire drugs. Why wouldn't that be a?
When I see cross-sex and not say dispensaries, you said regulations and taxation. Our card says you
Okay,
need to
then what
specify
kind of
even more
regulation
than
do you
that.
want me to say?
Like the type, so like, is it for 25 and older? Is it for 21 and older? Is there a licensing process?
Okay, that's fine.
You need to specify.
Okay, treaties just said, so this really doesn't make sense to me. Why does U.S. non-compliance on the drug treaty means like other treaties, like, I don't know, NATO suddenly becomes like non-effective?
Coplo 13. Flouting undermines treaties and
I know that
jeopardizes
you
the
have evidence,
entire
but, like,
fabric of
logically-
international law. Unexcused,
I know
unjustified,
that you
non-compliance,
read
sullies
evidence.
the entire reputation of treaties,
So
full
you're
array of
saying
them, from
NATO
trade to
countries
human
will no
rights to
longer
law of the
cooperate.
sea.
I know that you have evidence, but logically explain it to me. So other countries like NATO countries will suddenly not cooperate with the United States just because we legalize marijuana.
Well, they don't trust our credibility on commitments, right? Because we're
Just because we legalize marijuana.
Yeah, we've pushed for prohibition in the UN convention for 50
Yeah,
years.
and then Obama
we
came out and
backed
said
off
he's not
with
going
no
to-
amendment to the process. Like, the process
Yeah.
is huge. The act is out of nowhere, doesn't go to the convention, which is actually happening in
Doesn't assume
2016.
things like, Obama coming out and saying, I'm not going to do anything when the states are legalizing.
Yeah, that's not
Why doesn't that already
legalization.
trigger the
That's not
dissent?
legalization, that's not enforcement, which is distinct. and our
Except
evidence
your
draws that
you
distinction.
just made a credibility argument that the other countries don't perceive US to be credible because we're
The
wishy-washy
plan
on the
causes
treaty.
us to unilaterally abrogate a treaty that we have been pushing for 60
That's fine.
years.
The
That's
midterm-
the link to credibility.
The
That's pretty
midterm,
clear.
the midterms dissent, so, your evidence indicates the turnout from the marijuana is critical to the election. Why doesn't like ballot initiatives that already exist now, flip the outcome?
Because federal legalization would be on a much more massive
Or
scale.
what about
Massive
the, what about
It's
the
not
plan that
ballot.
said the plan has to be ballot initiatives?
The plan doesn't have to be ballot initiatives. Our argument
Then
is
why is there a link?
because federal legalization would cause broad turnout for the Democrats.
Why?
I.e., if there's a signal
Your
of
evidence,
Obama
your
doing things
your
that's
evidence is
fine.
actually pretty explicit that the ballot initiatives are what causes the youth to come to the election table and vote for the Democrats. If the
No,
plan is
that's not true.
not a ballot initiative, why do we trigger
No,
this
you're
turnout?
lying. I mean, our card is about turnout broadly, the effect of what Obama
Yeah, and then citing the
policies-
GW poll, which was about the midterm ballot
Sure,
initiatives,
the app could entail more votes on ballot initiatives, sure.
doesn't
It just
answer
says
my
US.
first question, which was that Alaska or other states that already have the marijuana, why wouldn't that sway the election?
Because our argument is that that's already factored into our uniqueness, and we have a link that
I doubt
assumes that.
that's true.
That is true, it's from today when they wrote about. Oh, the first one. No. And then the second space card, one.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh, sorry, the status of all the,
That's goes logical.
okay.
Whichever it is. I would guess.
Yeah, I think so too.
Understandable.
Okay. I'm good.
How much crap do you got? What's that?
8:56,
Okay.
around 9, so.
It'll be cartels, FBI, topicality. And the laundering counterplan. The prosecution's counterplan. The treaty dissad, the midterms dissad, and then the criticism. Sorry. Yeah, I gotta do this. But they all have it. Violence now legislated when a sufficient question they're able to collapse the investment in the Mexico energy sector within key areas that are controlled by cartels now, which means there's no reason why violence down affects those business or areas that the government does not have control over, which means we give them law enforcement cooperation to be able to resolve those questions. Yes, legalization is sufficient to solve against law enforcement for the DEA to attack other drugs within the U.S. and give Mexican government the ability to have corruption problems within their own government to be able to enforce the law. And syndicates are not going to other drugs because they do not have high demand, which means we're sufficient to collapse the 40% of overall investment, which means there's no way that they would be able to sustain their operations in those areas to be able to undermine investment for energy reforms. Or evidence indicates Mexico's economy is resilient. That is not our impact scenario. Evidence in the context of U.S. shocks and producer states that would have a decline from a high prices, which means that Mexico is not able to produce now. The U.S., North America, alliances to happen between Canada, U.S., and Mexico, all being able to have a massive energy boom that are able to sustain hegemony, which be able to attack OPEC pricing, and as well as the Russians, which means our impact claim, yes, it does have an impact hegemony, indicates it's able to maintain things like deterrence, flows, international cooperation, economic interdependence, as well as democracy that independently sustains peace, independently is able to sustain peace operations in the status quo. Okay. Internally discovered evidence from the FBI directors indicates that the worker shortage now is happening because of the CSE law that indicates you're not able to come within now, which means production is insufficient to solve cases of cyber war. Evidence of 2014 says NSA directors and FBI that indicate the cyber attacks coming from either terrorist or state-based sponsors. Yes, missile defense status quo is insufficient to solve. Evidence indicates with a cyber attack and cyber espionage, which is independent from that scenario from the Chinese, that able to still modernize their weapons technology, no defense to modernization, or the China scenario, which is able to check A2AD technologies grid. In fact, it's also as well as accident launch. I should have to do a lot of work here, and there are now responding to topicality question. We are regulations. The prep time said we are regulations like taxation and normal means counter-tradition, normal means solves the entirety of their net benefit. Obviously, not decriminalization, which their evidence assumes are removed from the CSE as regulatory framework of taxation, or the youth that not going to be sold to cross-sex would resolve these things. Policy education, we were able to resolve that include regulatory mechanisms that are critical to solve our gauge. How else we're able to resolve the cartel scenario, not presumption. Arguments indicates removing from the CSA sufficient to solve all of our arguments makes it worse. We're limits in ground because it makes it infinitely aggressive over specifying what is the reasonable and how much we need to specify the sufficient for negative ground, which is a reasonability should be an easy burden to check substantive credit and race to the bottom of the counterclaim. Permutation should be able sufficient to shield should be sufficient to shield politics. Allows the Republicans to have something to stand for. They are able to massively have money laundering that are check filters, which means we cannot have some democratic crowd that should overshield. The plan can't solve cartels. The laundering is insufficient to solve violence within those areas. Those areas are already controlled by the government, which means we need to solve corruption within Mexico to be able to finally check those areas and shift to be able to shift to other drugs links to politics. There is drug evidence that indicates they would allow FBI to allow workers in, which means it's functional legalization from a major government agency should be sufficient to trigger the politics scenario. Conditionalities bad to assist humans, app offense, strategic choice, argumentative responsibility, negative goes for what is least covered disposition ourselves gives the app flexibility. Their drug claim is also object to the FBI is structurally prohibited from hiring workers using the CS means no literature exists for the FBI shortcutting the federal rule. We can never debate solvency, lack of solvency, has to be magnified, or abuse countenance, legal federal law requires uniform application of security clearance among all agencies with the countenance signed of Cohen in 2000. The adjudicated agency perform requirements, all employees statutory mandate was accomplished by the agency of the uniform methods, guidelines, all of U.S. government agency uniform standards, national security, or internal lack of clear guidance for project and inconsistent security determinations across agencies and records authority for the process for use as a matter of national security. The GEO recommends procedures used by agencies, counterpunch, FBI's political capital, important to the political bureaucratic firm to take a agency for the drug use legal, federal legal, unlikely for the FBI to start economy service that undermines budget negotiations, key to effective FBI operations, bill enforcing the budget negotiations for the FBI positions and build the experts warrant. It is difficult to these when jobs are already few agents, companies have Congress working together, have a complete compromise on optimism of some sort of agreement permutation to the counterclaim. Next counterclaim. Obviously doesn't solve any of the cartel's advantage. That is our argument of the state-federal conflict that's happening now is because of federal prosecution. We need to remove federal prohibition, so they're not prosecuting, so the states are able to effectively legalize in their states. Otherwise, the federal government inhibits things with like water, or FBI or DEA rates permutation, both shields the link to politics. There's a massive challenge to cartels and attacking. Funding should be sufficient to shield for Republicans with the link to the dissent permutation to the counterclaim links to politics. They are an advocacy for attacking the massive drug mechanism that's occurring in the status quo via the DEA, the federal prosecution doesn't solve any of the FAA, do not remove the security clearances law from the CSA, which is the internally being able to resolve that internally to treaties. Uruguay, Washington, Colorado, Tonkin, and 13. UN is issuing a public review scheme. Uruguay passed a law for legalizing marijuana violation 1961 conflict of conflict of drugs. The issuing a similar rebuke of Colorado, Washington, passed legislation treaties no enforcement mechanism. The treaty power in 13. The conventional treaty of narcotics drugs not having strong enforcement mechanisms. For Uruguay, do nothing of that for your prosecution plan doesn't violate the conventions very at all. 11 is possible to reform by violating international conventions. All three treaties able to have public use for drugs at the same time adhering to the UN treaty Netherlands, especially applicable for the U.S. is not using toleration in regards to marijuana possession. No commitment to international law. Now, Canadian 14. Illegally would have a zero chance of passing instead of other countries. The highlights how difficult it is to get a treaty through passing passing the current climate deserve to pass the domestic legislation difficult for verification of international possible no spillover from drugs to other trade mechanisms. And hegemony should be able to solve the maintenance of public goods internationally politics. Just add. Democrats will win momentum easily. 916, the momentum is shifting to the models. The Democrats better 50% of the chance of winning. The Senate says change in Colorado. Good old 64% is 94% of Iowa, or it's 59% of Roberts re-elected race for 60% chance of winning. Democrats said Democrats 70% momentum shifts. Democrats 90 pick up a Republican control seat. The Senate, the Democrat gets got stronger. Legalization leads to Republican win. Youth polls for now Austin. Unfortunately, legalization came up to resistance from like over 65 results in Democrats. Six home polls predict that each category is eligible voters for the polls election people in 2012 times they have no intention of voting. Right now, backlash always really gets into 13 despite legalization victories. There is more intensity for those who not legalize it. Ag votes to those who favor Proposition 19, about 39% of states voters are strongly opposed, for 41% of voters who are definitely opposed, 27% who definitely would be in favor. The plan is just a drop in the bucket of election issues and unpredictable recurring 8-9. Ask voters with midterm elections for down the road, squad middle class. So these reserves calling Confederates hear about immigration, Russian rise from dominant thief, raise American results in an easily unpredictable rate. December dominated Ukraine and Iraq, and minimum wage leads to Democratic control of the Senate. In 19, the Democrats control the right range of the Democrats needed to issue public for the public the policies most effective for the minimum wage needed to tremendous surge of activism for minimum wage. Beyond this immediate midterm election this month away means marijuana will be on the ballot. Republicans in a majority does nothing, self-actions would create gridlock. And as it soon happens, Republicans in a majority of GOP controls members will be under pressure for the Senate GOP. CD divided aware of pragmatic conservatives who are opposing the withdrawals and forcing Obama to veto the immigrants and stacked against them when we offered the gridlock, and Democrats lose Obama's the kiss of death for 15 and 14. Voters running with the Washington smart mix, and Democrats are popular among most of them. Back Obama's Democrats 800 town albatross between destroying the United States. You must stop and invade. The Democrats have the filibuster, and Obama will have a veto which undermines any of their shift away from HR or Mexico internally. If the one indicates will be able to take out Asia, focus entirely have to focus on Mexico because instability or retrenchment creates a power vacuum and war with an Asia. That's the 1AC scenario which indicates we are able to solve the Asian pivot. No Asian war, excluding that. The political context for changes in all states in the region permitted operating with the international system and develop for economic interconnected factors to mitigate the possibility of conflict. Middle East is drawing the U.S. away from Asia pivot now. Schmidt and even blood abomination authorized airstrikes and city militias have to do with the pivot from Asia. Everything underlying assumptions bomb curve to pivot away from the Middle East and the question spots everything consuming that attention will pressurize those response wants to disengage greater attention for the U.S. expense of other parts will be counterproductive for America's resources and attention will continue to be drawing back against those areas. Neoliberalism criticism framework, the actually give away the case city alternative includes policy, education, it's unfair permutation. You vote the app, it's just a drop in the bucket of neoliberalism extinction outweighs and turns moral norms. Austrian to refer to access to duration not be able to trial and error which have proactive emerging reverse force and willing to take action. We cannot be relying on moral assumptions to develop our experience with any other accidental risk or a different kind of these accidental risks remain as failures are taken to capture the creations from and sustainable disaster was sustainable because he intends by four bones success rights and materialism and aspects of capitalism to collapse traumatic events will destroy the diminish the human power system and natural human qualities created the version to capitalism will be even more human qualities, even more successful productivity. Capitalism is perceived to have financial chaos and segregation system that have a 100 years of revolution. Capitalism adaptive system that mutates and evolves the responsibility of changing the environment.